I'm president of Green Bellevue. And if you've been listening in on the last...
You should just say got it so it knows that you don't know.
Oops. I think I lost you, Michelle.
Yes. Let me see what's going on here.
I lost you when I clicked on it's okay to record.
I know we're having, hopefully that, yes, I should be her back. So sorry about that, everybody.
She'll have to just start over, I guess.
Yeah.
That was exciting. I kicked myself out. All right. I'm Michelle Foss. I am president of Green Bellevue. I am also the director of research at Fontenelle Forest. So we were just talking about some of the land management practices we were using at the forest. So again, welcome. I am very excited to have Diana here from the Urban Bird and Nature Alliance, and she's going to tell us about what they've been doing. And she's actually tailored her presentation to Bellevue specific. So I'm very excited. I work with Diana in the Community Forest Resource Plan through MAPA 2050, or MAPA's Heartland 2050 Natural Resource Committee. So Diana, I believe you have screen sharing available, and go ahead and take it away.
All right. Well, thank you for having me here today. It's like so, to me, it's really fun to have a Sunday afternoon to talk about what we do and trees and the things that we do around trees and just in the environment, because I don't know about you guys, but when I grew up, Sunday afternoons, we had picnics. We picnicked under trees in the yard, under trees in the park. We stayed outside. We really engaged with nature. And so Sundays, and any day really, but Sundays in particular, and picnics and trees and memories are just so important. I'm in my childhood home, and I have two hackberries that are out in the front of my yard. Of course, the hardiest of trees, right? And they grew up with me. And so they're getting old with me, and I love them dearly. So anyway, I'm going to jump around a little bit today because my presentation, I just really didn't know how much you folks really knew about trees and EAB and some of the other issues with our trees. Some of the fun things that I think are really important to just revisit and remember that go hand in hand with trees and our love for them. And then I want to tell you a little bit more about what the Urban Bird and Nature Alliance does and what we have been involved in as well. And then buckle back in the end to Bellevue, some Bellevue trees. I was able to speak with Joanne, or we emailed back and forth, and she gave me a list of places in Bellevue that could use trees. And then of course, Don Preister had some other places as well. And so I was able to get some photographs and areas. I love to drive around the city in Omaha, in Bellevue, in Springfield, Papillion, because in my estimation, that's really the best way to get your assessments of the street trees, the parks, the neighborhoods, is to really just drive them and get to know the neighborhood, look at historic boulevards yourself and determine, wow, those look like, there's 25 or 56 stumps here, and so whether those were ash trees or whether they may have been trees that are downed in the park now because of a storm. And you really just get a good feel for where the gaps might be, or where definitely new trees are needed. So I'll begin to share my screen now, and then or my PowerPoint, and then I will just say that we we'll just kind of stop a little bit, and there are a few abrupt places where we kind of switch gears, but I think it'll be in good places that you'll be ready for switching. So, all right. So here we are. You can't talk about nature, I think, without discussing the great writers, Willa Cather, and our Midwest authors, that Bess Streeter Aldrich, John Neihart, just all the greats. And so I love Willa Cather's line from O Pioneer. She says, "I like trees because they seem more resigned to the way they have to live than other things do." And then Amy Levy said, "Green is the plane tree," of course, our sycamore trees, "in the square. The other trees are brown. They droop and pine for country air. The plane tree loves the town." And so that was one of the first, 1889, when we really, and before, where we really knew which trees were good urban trees. And obviously, even her quote tells us that the sycamore trees love the city and do well in an urban environment. This is our logo. We are the Urban Bird and Nature Alliance. We don't do much with birds anymore. We've been trying to kind of drop the bird and call us the Urban Nature Alliance, but we seem to go back to the birds, and that's okay, because I think we're going to get back and do a little bit more with birds as well. Here's some information about myself. I am also a certified international arborist as well. And, in Omaha, if you're familiar with Omaha, I'm president of Midtown Neighborhood Alliance also. And Midtown Neighborhood Alliance is an alliance of 17 of the most historic landmark districts in the city. And that's really relevant because, along with the older neighborhoods come the older parks, the older trees, nature that has just either been there for a long time or redeveloped in time as well. And so Omaha is really lucky in this respect. We're very endowed with about 186 neighborhood associations that are extremely engaged. And most of them, they're on the north side, south side as well, but in Midtown, they are very highly involved, meaning they're also highly involved with their tree canopy. So our mission statement, I'd like to, can't get over to this screen here. Hang on. Well, goodness. All right. So the Urban Bird and Nature Alliance is established to appreciate, respect, and value, protect, educate, and support the preservation and conservation of nature and urban environments pertaining to urban forestry, sustainable landscapes, bird life, wildlife, and natural resources. We work to preserve and restore nature for the public gain in Omaha and the state of Nebraska. And lately, we've really been moving into smaller municipalities, Papillion, Fremont, Springfield. We've done lots of tree planting in that area as well, in those areas. And so our focus, we consult on a community-wide tree-related project and sustainable landscapes. We are really focused. The need came, and I'll tell you why we kind of wandered away from the birding as well, because the need with EAB came at about the time when we were established in 2012. And of course, EAB hit us in 2016, at least in our state, when we discovered it. And so with an environmental nonprofit, I think it's important to move with where the need is greatest as well. And so we went into sustaining and maintaining the tree canopy in urban forest and city right-of-ways, in neighborhoods and parks and green spaces, school grounds, hospitals, and other public grounds as well. and provide the community and school education and workshops are really important for us to address the current tree crisis with EAB, but not just EAB. There's other things that begin to arise, right? The invasion of the, or the invasive tree of heaven, and just other things that we deal with in the environment as well. And so we replace and plant in the understory of trees that are downed, unhealthy trees, aging trees. We plant in newly developed areas that have never seen very many trees at all. And we work to revitalize city parks and historic boulevards. I'm a former landmark commissioner in Omaha. And so when we talk about landmark structures and homes, there are trees that are landmarks as well. And so we you know, when there's a historic boulevard, we like to make sure that it stays historic even in its landscape as well, or is revitalized. And then we love to advocate before City Council and the legislature on behalf of environmental needs and for funding, because we need funding to do the work that we do. And so I'm not going to spend much time on EAB. I feel like I'd be preaching to the choir if I did, but I thought we'd just revisit it real quickly. If I was in person, I'd pass around the beautiful emerald ash borer along with its larvae, and we could all look at it and take a look at the bark and the inside cambium. But since I can't do that, I thought we'd at least just touch on it for a moment. And so EAB was found in South Omaha, Pulaski Park, and in June of 2016 during a press conference, you probably all remember, and the mayor was talking about EAB and funding that needed to go, funding streams and such. And then there we were using an ash tree as an example, and those of us that were arborists and educators and such just kind of looked at each other and went, oh, wow, I think that's it, isn't it? And sure enough, within a few days, we knew that it was it. And so EAB fast facts, and I'm sure you know these, but EAB has killed millions of trees since 2012. 20 million ash in Michigan alone have been destroyed, and then tens of millions throughout the US and Canada are the newest of stats. Trees die within a few years. Treatment can be done, but it's the life of the tree. I know here we're no longer treating, the city is no longer treating ash trees. The financial losses are in the billions. It's an exotic species from Asia, and it kills trees regardless of health conditions or size. And so here is our beautiful emerald ash borer. It's amazing it's so damaging, because for a bug, it's pretty. And metallic green, 1/2 inch long, feeds on the ash leaves. That's not where it really does its damage though. It lays eggs in the bark. The larvae is creamy white and kills the trees by burrowing and tunneling under the bark. Females lay 50 to 90 eggs on the ash bark, and the eggs hatch in 1 to 2 weeks. And the reason I wanted to show this picture is because that D shape that you see, we'll see burrowing holes in an ash tree or other trees that are not the emerald ash borer, because when the emerald ash borer emerges, it emerges like a D, and you can see its face. Oh, wow. And so we know that the emerald ash borer is native to the range in Asia and was thought to be brought in on wooden crates through China. Here's a good map that I always like to just keep in a PowerPoint or a presentation because you can really see how rapidly it spreads. 2002, Michigan, 2005. You see how we just keep adding states and states. 2015, This is a 2017 map, and you can just see how saturated this is everywhere in more of the East Coast, and as it's moving a bit west. But from 2017 to 2021, we've really added South Dakota and South Carolina, which we didn't have in the previous map in that couple year span. Now, I haven't done much research in that area, and I can't tell you much about it, but I am very curious if anyone even here knows why Florida and some of the other states, especially Florida, has escaped EAB. I have my hunches, but. And so we know that EAB is an aggressive tree killer, ash-lined trees. 3 years later, you can see that they are gone. They are dead and declined. And financial impact of EAB on Nebraska communities, 896 ash trees in cities, towns, and statewide, about 1 million ash trees. Removal, disposal, and replacement. Our organization was part of testifying before the legislature, asking for dollars that were already in an ordinance, but they had been depleted, and so we asked for dollars to be brought back for the removal of ash and then the replacement of ash trees and disposal as well. The total cost to municipalities and homeowners, $961 million to remove and replace. We also know that the symptoms of EAB include thinning and branch dieback, usually beginning in the top of the tree. I always tell people to look up, and you know that 30%, if it's more than 30% dieback, then you really, a few years ago, we even recommended not to treat. Now, of course, I don't believe there are arborists that are still recommending to treat, except in particular circumstances. So sprouting from the base of the tree, bark splitting, zigzag tunnels below the bark, and D-shaped exit holes, 1/4 of an inch across, and bark stripping from woodpecker activity. And so here's what you would basically see: the D-shaped exit holes and the bark stripping as well. And then you can, of course, see at the top of the tree, there's lots of dieback. Sparse foliage, branch dieback, more pictures. I have lots of pictures in this presentation. Hope you like pictures. And then epicormic sprouts, more bark stripping. Identifying an ash have opposite leaf patterns. And the one thing that's important you can read there is that there are a lot of lookalikes. And so make sure you know before you have your ash tree taken down that it for sure is a true ash. We've had people that have asked about that after the fact. And so don't want to do that. Tree risk points to remember. EAB may be the most dangerous insect ever introduced into North America. Investments now will reduce the total cost to taxpayers later. When we say now, it was pretty much in 2016 is the now, when it was diagnosed, and we knew that we could definitely do something at that time. We tried, lots of us tried, many educators tried to really go into communities and say, you know, look, a lot of times the emerald ash borer is in a community before it even is diagnosed. And but as is the case with human beings, sometimes we need to actually see it before we believe it. So trees killed by EAB quickly become a risk to life and property and increase legal liabilities. It's much easier and safer and cheaper to remove a live ash tree than a dead one. Dead trees are brittle and unsafe. ash trees on school property are dangerous. We did a project, the Urban Nature Alliance did a project through the NET with Brownell Talbot School in Omaha, and the school is on the left. And you can see that that's the entrance of the school, and it's one huge, huge ash tree. And they treated, I go back every 6 months to a year to see how it's doing. So far, it's doing pretty good. So it's a primary tree for them. The last thing they wanted to do was take the tree down to EAB, especially since it wasn't infested with EAB yet. And, you know, it may be one of those trees that escapes giving way to the emerald ash borer. One thing we did do, though, was we advised to have something planted right underneath the hill behind it as understory. So if it does give way, there's something in its wake. Here are 14 ash trees, and I know for many of you that live in Bellevue, this portion won't be quite as, you know, you may not know where Minaloosa Elementary is, but the bottom line is that the most important thing is that this is a school property, and there are 14 ash trees that line where children and families walk. There's going to be a huge loss of shade when they do decline, and the danger in terms of branching and all the storms we've had. You know, we've traveled the streets and looked at what kind of trees were they that really went down in these last July storms, and so many of them definitely were ash trees, because of course we know that they are brittle and they break at the branch crotch. Aging trees, broken branches, storms, and other diseases. Not everything's EAB, and you can see this is South High School, that there's a branch right above them that's just ready to give way. So I always say it's good to look down, make sure you see what's down there, and it's good to look up, make sure you see what's right above you. These are ash trees surrounding a fountain where children play. And the reason that I wanted to share this slide with you is because there are the ash, and the one thing is that there were some understory trees that were planted, but neighbors were torn, right? I mean, people are torn. The tree just looks beautiful still. The trees look beautiful still. Why would we remove them? And for some, they're shade, and for others, you know, they represent danger, and they're going to need to go down eventually. So why don't we have the city take them down and move forward? Our organization likes to do both. So if they're really dangerous, if they're declining rapidly, if the branches are hanging, if they don't look healthy, and, you know, there are other ways that we can measure health, but if that's the case, then we definitely quickly have them take it. You know, we recommend for them to be removed, and the city knows that too if it's in parks and right of ways. But also, what everyone else should have been doing, could still do, needs to jump on board to do, and that's get those trees planted, newly trees in the understory of those trees that we know are old, declining, so that we have something that's there and becoming established before the other trees give way. And something that I feel, so this is Historic Prospect Hill Cemetery in Omaha. It was founded in 1858. And because I really do have a feel for historic structures and places and such, cemeteries are very much so historic. And this is one particular cemetery that holds many unhealthy ash trees, but also just old trees. It's been around since 1858. So I noticed that, of course, when they get old and they die in cemeteries, a lot of times they just are not replaced. And sometimes it's being short-staffed. There's no one to bring that project forward. There's no one to write that particular grant or fundraise for that project. So I like to make sure we don't forget our cemeteries. They're, this one's 35 acres of land, but there are others that are even much larger as well. So you can't talk about trees without talking about the great benefits. Oxygen, improving air quality. That's something that our organization really thinks is important. There are more incidences of asthma calls on our north side, marginalized areas of the city, south side as well. And there are many, many areas that are completely tree barren. Either there are no trees in that area, never were trees, were historic trees that are now old and gone. Is that, a coincidence that asthma calls are made? I don't think so. I think it's a little of all things. But for sure, planting trees to give oxygen improves that air, sequesters air pollution, gives energy, shade. We're also very focused on reducing heat islands, making things, everyone deserves to live in a pretty place. And boulevards, why do we love some of our old neighborhoods? Because trees line the boulevards, they line people's houses, they just add an aesthetic. And regardless of whether folks know of all the benefits, they know usually about the beauty of where they're living. And so the educational portion of coming back and saying, working with children or the neighborhood association to educate on why it's important to plant trees, that's one thing. But also for many people, it's the beautification and the pride of place of their neighborhood and their park and their green space. And of course, we also know that trees provide wildlife habitat and shelter, reduce noise, provide privacy, the aesthetics, and psychological well-being. These days, especially, our parks, again, for me, the part during COVID and our time of quarantine, or not just quarantine, but being really safe, we have utilized our parks as we never have before. And so they've been a place of refuge for us and psychological well-being. So what do we do with and around trees? Well, I don't know. I never had a tree house. I still want one. It doesn't matter how old I am. I want a tree house one day with a view of the city from above. And we play around trees. We gather for shade in the heat of the summer sun. Parties are had, gatherings with friends, church groups. Always seem to find that spot, that perfect spot of cool in the shade. We feed and give a home to bird life. Again, if you look up in the winter, you'll really see those nests, the squirrel nests and bird nests that are up in your big trees, especially the ash trees too. Trees help create objects and fun art. Midtown Crossing had a special tree art event where people did their artwork that they loved the most, and then it was related to trees and they hung them on trees, and it turned into a fundraiser. Trees illuminate the city at Christmas time. While all of our trees are gone, I don't know if you've been in downtown Omaha in the area now, but as it gets redeveloped, the first thing that went in, one of the first things that went in was the landscape, the trees, and the native grasses, which to me was so interesting because usually developers and development, if there anything goes in, it's the structure, and then comes the landscape and the trees. But I think in this case, developers knew that people were disappointed about all the trees that left that area. So newly planted trees are in abundance in the area now. We like to neatly contain trees. Does it work? I don't think so. And then trees mean better business. oops, I'm sorry. Trees mean better business. In tree-lined commercial districts, people frequently shop longer. They spend more, and they spend 12% more on goods, and they'll drive out of their way to go to that area. Where would you rather shop? It's pretty obvious, the shade to me. Of course, you know, in some areas, such as the one on the left, where are you going to plant those trees? So as we create new development, there is so much awareness now that of needing to have areas that are green spaces. And I really like that. And I think at least in Omaha, we really have some developers that are very well aware of that, of making sure that nature meets structure. Trees in the Dundee district. I don't name too many of these for you because I know if you live in Bellevue, you might not have been to some of the places in Omaha, and it may not mean as much, but Dundee's pretty popular. And so okay, I think we're back. Trees, native grasses, and benches allow for a lot of lingering. I really should take this frame here because no one's lingering, and they usually do. And so, can you all hear me?
So Diana, we can hear you, but your screen isn't being shared anymore.
Okay, let me come back then. Not sure why. Goodness. Okay, we started clocking what looked on your end. Am I on?
There we go.
Okay. All right, good. Not sure why we left. All right, so yes, this is the frame I just said that I probably should remove because I say that people linger and no one's there, but on a normal day, they linger, especially in the summertime and the spring. So you can see it's just young and old trees live together in Blackstone. If you've ever been to the newly developed and redevelopment of Blackstone neighborhood in Omaha. Young trees line the sidewalk at Midtown Crossing. They're probably about 2 years older than this particular frame now. Trees give us a sense of place and walkability. They provide the beauty and a place to go at Turner Park. This is, of course, where Jazz on the Green and a lot of other the outdoor opera, different concerts. And trees cool our streets and decrease heat islands. Very important. I love all those cars, right? We have to park, I guess, public transportation and the streetcar soon, but you'll notice there that there are trees all along the parking lot. And the net cooling effect of a young, healthy tree is equivalent to 10 room size air conditioners operating 20 hours a day. And so very important to our organization to reduce heat islands. So I'm going to kind of move away from EAB, go a little bit into projects that we have been engaged in as an environmental nonprofit. We have been part of the annual Earth Day tree planting in Elmwood Park. And so every day we held our some birding seminars years ago. Something that we're really strong about working in is neighborhoods. And so right now, as a nonprofit and as a consulting nonprofit, we are working with a neighborhood in Omaha called Regency. The neighborhood is a pretty prominent neighborhood that was founded in the 1970s, and it has become known for its beautiful trees and boulevards. When it was first established, it was so stark, naked, tree barren, like most neighborhoods are, right? But this one really had, I mean, just ash trees lining its boulevard, and close to 1,000 of them. And so we are consulting with them. At the time of probably about a year ago, 500 trees had received treatment by the homeowners. And so we have gone in and done enough education to where the homeowner now knows not to really treat their tree. And you can see on the right screen that there are homeowners and others that have said, okay, let's go ahead and plant in that understory of the ash tree. And you'll see the ash tree on the left and the younger tree on the right that's really it's really grown well. And so by the time those ash are taken down, there will have been some trees established. All in the medians, ash, and you can just imagine 1,000 trees. I mean, this is pretty much their right-of-way canopy and in their park for Regency. Once in a while, you'll see a silver maple. Like, that's a whole lot better, right? But there's just very little other species. If there's an example of what not to do, planting one species, this particular area is one of them. We're going to really miss all those beautiful ash trees there, though. But we're working to get things into the ground right away, new trees planted, and diversify. So what we also do, and this is really important, and I know that you folks work to plant trees as well in various neighborhoods and parks, but we make sure that if we're in a neighborhood, the last thing a nonprofit wants, or any of us would want, is to have a neighbor or a resident be upset that we're planting a tree in the right of way or into their yard even. So many yards are, you think it's your yard, but 20 feet in is really city right of way. And so while the Parks Department could do that, they don't want to, make people unhappy as well, but we really didn't. And so what we do is we make sure we hang a door hanger that tells people about tree planting and when it's going to happen and phone numbers, and it gives them an opt-out date so that if they don't want a tree in their yard, they don't have to have one, or not just in their yard, but in their right of way in front of their home. And so a lot of times we get calls back. Sometimes people wait till last minute when we're actually ready to dig the hole. And then they come outside asking, what are you guys doing? And some are happy and some not so much. So on the left side, you'll see the flyer. So we also leave flyers for everything. This is a recruitment flyer for volunteers, but also it goes into everyone's mailbox as well, so that if they miss the door hanger, they see the flyer. And in particular neighborhoods, we make sure that they're also in Spanish or other languages if need be, so people understand. And it's real interesting, the people behavior and neighborhood behavior is always fascinating to me because, some people are so adamant about not wanting trees, and that's their perfect right. They don't want to maintain them. They don't know how. They don't want to mess with them. They think they're expensive. They don't want to prune. They don't know how. But at the same time, on planting day, I always hold back about 5 trees because definitely there will be at least 3 people, 3 families that'll come to us and say, do you have an extra tree? Because it's such a fun event, and they see everyone out there and their neighbors receiving a tree, and they change their mind. So that's always fun to watch. Exarban Elmwood Park neighborhood, along the Papio were 109 unhealthy ash trees. We wrapped them. We have stopped wrapping, because what we wrapped with, of course, was the EAB awareness wrap. But I have to tell you that wrapping trees was one of the most valuable things we could have done in terms of raising awareness and impact. We wrapped 500 trees in Regency and took a trolley and then wrapped in other neighborhoods. And then we rented a trolley and we packed it with community people and said, let's go take a look at your community. And when we got to Regency and some of these areas, like what's on the screen now, the trolley went dead silent, because you can point to a tree, you can say, oh, our ash trees are going to come down, or our oaks are declining, or, look at all those trees that came down in the storm. But until you go see them, and with the green ribbon especially, it was very, very impactful. So I would say that in the future, whether it's EAB, whether it's bur oak decline, whether it's the tree of heaven that's invasive, if it's in a neighborhood or a park, find a color wrap, have it say whatever you want, that make sure you clear it with the city, and it says tree of heaven, invasive species. It's so, the ribbons were very, they just really, really served to raise awareness. Elmwood Park neighborhood. In this frame, you can see the larger ash tree and then the smaller tree growing right alongside of it. I believe that ash tree, I know it's declined very much so. There's 2 of them, actually, 2 of the smaller newly planted trees and the one ash behind it. But it's very much declined, and I believe it's actually been removed. I'm not quite sure, the large ash tree, but we've really done a lot of work, and we've just kept it up in Elmwood Park and just kept it up. That's where our champion tree lives too. Ash trees along a right-of-way, and I'll just show you this. They were all lying down 38th Street in Omaha, and then the city removed them all. And then we brought them right back. When we bring them back, we didn't bring back ash trees, of course. We brought back a diversity of trees. To get to this point, we met with the neighborhood association. We educated. They were empowered enough to look at what trees we can plant, what species do well in particular areas, right tree, right place. It really empowered the neighborhoods, and sometimes people come together for one reason, right? In this case, it was trees. Other cases might be crime or safety. And so they were able to choose some of the top 5 species that they felt they'd like to see in their park. And of course, we came back and planted that day, and it was in 2 phases for Bemis Park. Ash trees in your yard need attention. You can see those are all around the corner and in the front. The project we worked on with Brownell Talbot, we took it right down to Memorial Park, if you're familiar with that area in Omaha, and we wrapped those trees, and then we came back and we planted grow bag trees. Same thing here. You can see the diversity of what we planted. Red oaks, people often say to me, oh, I want maple trees because I want color. We want color in our neighborhood. We had all these sycamores and now we're sick of them and we want color. And so we educate them to tell them and show them, actually go in with a beautiful PowerPoint of different trees and species and say, well, here's how you can have red color. We can plant red oaks instead of just red maples. And here's how you can have, trees that don't have, I have people say, I don't want leaves. You know, just, I don't want leaves. I don't want to rake trees, or I don't want to rake leaves. And so the honey locust works for them sometimes. And also the swamp white oak that holds on to its leaves till February. But be careful if you tell some people that, because then they'll say, oh no, there's more leaves in February, and they won't want that tree either. So interesting how that works. But shingle oak, we planted bald cypress, catalpa, one of my favorites. They're beautiful in a park, and and boulevards. And then the London plane tree. And then we packed a trolley and we took people around. We've hosted trolley tree tours that just went to look at, we have a Druid bur oak from the 1300s. We have a twisted, what I call, next frame, a twisted catalpa. This was a chestnut tree that actually we thought would qualify for a champion tree. Twisted bur oaks, I mean, just twisted bark catalpas in Hanscom Park. And it was really fun for people. People love to ride a trolley anyway, right? If you're on a trolley tour, you just sit back and it's like, oh, all right. And to go to a place that you've been before, but truly have someone point out, let's get out right now and take a look at this tree. And they know they've passed it a million times on their way to work, maybe not, but here it is in a particular park or a particular right of way. And it's as if they're looking at a part of the city that's brand new. And they're always fun. The tree tours are fun. And when we work with neighborhoods, we make sure and plot our data. We've gotten a little more sophisticated and working to get there with data plotting. But at the same time, just a map with what species and where you planted it around the schools really works well as well. So one other project that we had a ball with, we designed the Burke High School Stadium during, and this is, so one of the, sports, so the coach, of Burke years ago planted 67 Scotch pine trees as windbreak, as beauty, as noise, especially with Dodge Street. Not really much shade, but they were planted and they were beautiful. And then of course, Scotch pine wilt came and the trees were destroyed. And so when we came on board, we were asked to redesign the Burke High School Stadium. And so those 67 trees were removed, made me sick to my stomach to watch, but they were removed. And then we came back and said, well, let's check this place out. So during a track meet, people are outside and it's hot and there is no shade at all. So we thought, well, we need shade trees for sure. And so we did that. So we kind of looked at, you can see in the background there, all those beautiful, beautiful trees. Many of them stayed. They were not Scotch pine, but many of them were taken down, of course, were removed, 67 of them. And then at the scoreboard, it's much more of a slopey hill. We had the maintenance people saying, oh my gosh, our mowers just roll down that hill. It's really dangerous. Can you help us with that? So we came back with a whole cascade of native grasses, which we need to go back and continue with too. And so this was the stadium in the desolate winter. This was the stadium when the trees were removed. So you can see we pretty much started with just a blank slate. This was our design of red oaks and shingle oaks and Vanderwolf pines and stone pines and Colorado pines and white spruces and just Taylor junipers. So one thing that we do for Burke, of course, and then all of our neighborhoods, we learned real fast that it's very difficult to dig a hole. right? For children, for adults, digging a hole double the size of your root ball is not the easiest, especially if you're in a park or a right of way that is clay-like. And so we, for our events, always, I can't imagine not doing this anymore. We always have our holes pre-augured the day before. So, and then a bag of mulch is laid for the event, which will be the next day. And so for volunteers, it's doubled our retention because volunteers have a good time without being so labor intensive for them, and more people can participate. So for Burke, this involved the students. So to a certain extent, we worked with the alumni. It was the Burke alumni that raised funds for the trees. But then the students measured the distance between the fence and where the trees would go between each other, which trees went where. I mean, so really incorporated into the science program as well. Auguring on a hill, that's much slopier than it even looks if you know the Burke Stadium. And then we, of course, the morning of, we had an educational session in the field. Lots of alumni from Burke came out to join us, and there they were. The Vanderwolf pines were laid out, ready to go. I mean, all we needed to do was remove them from the bag and have them planted. So we thought we'd have to go back and straighten every one of the trees, because we thought, oh my gosh, I mean, we're planting on a hill and it's not the easiest, but we didn't have to straighten one tree. So I don't know if we did a good job at our session or if volunteers just really knew what they were doing. So they had a ball, and now if you go to Burke, you can see that those trees are, that we have shade. And in a few more years, there will really be more shade and people can sit under while their spectators are looking at their sports. And then of course, you can see over by the fence that there are junipers, Taylor junipers. This was our group. Another thing that an environmental nonprofit gets to do is host garden walks and trolley tree tours. And so for a while, we hosted, and we'll go back to, a lot of things stopped due to COVID for a little bit, but we'll get back there. The garden walks were so much fun because we didn't make them in one area. We wanted people to really get out and check out each other's neighborhoods and parks. And so it was the Midtown neighborhood garden walk. And it meant that people started at one point, at one place, and then were given a map, and they had to kind of search out. It was pretty easy. So most of them were around the same area, but still it was fun for them to go downtown, to go midtown, to go, to neighborhoods that they normally wouldn't have been part of, and go find their garden as well. It wasn't a scavenger hunt. It was just there throughout Midtown. So we had historic gardens, bellflowers and salvia, all kinds of irises. I mean, we had thousands of pictures of our garden walk, so I didn't put too many here. Our peonies in the spring, homes that were a little more natural, perennial landscapes, simple backyards. You can see our trolley is in one of these. This particular historic garden was in Fair Acres, actually, and oh my, were there a lot of statues and bronze and just beautiful arches and such. And then one of the most recent projects that we're thrilled to be doing is the historic Cottonwood Hotel, the old Blackstone Hotel, if you're familiar with Omaha. You can see the two right at the top, the middle, and the one to the far right. Those are rooftop gardens, what used to be known as the Cottonwood was founded in 1916, built in 1916, and there were what they called the hanging gardens. So this is the cottonwood today on the west side, and this is the pool area you can see in the addition. And so we've been asked to, last year we designed the rooftop gardens, which we'll design this year again and implement and maintain, and then around the pool area as well, which really they're asking for tropicals in Nebraska. So that'll be really fun. What's really cool is we come into these places with an entourage of interns and students, and coincidentally, the Bellevue soccer team, the Bellevue University girls soccer team, they have been on board with the Cottonwood and just about all of our projects in the last year or two. They're just a great group of girls. And so it's great that students are able to earn service learning hours, have paid internships, because some of our work is, you know, a little more labor intensive. And so we do offer pay, and then just be part of projects that are historically rich. This is the Cottonwood at night. And then this is what we'll show you. This is how bare it was. So they took a really old hotel, and all the geo lines are just, I remember when I first looked at it, I thought, holy cow, like, where am I putting a garden up here? And so then we knew right away, of course, they'd be container gardens. And then that big octagon was for a tree in the sky. And this is just one of them. There's two of them. This is where the tree was going to go, or went, actually, where it is. And so to build a place for a tree, we found a guy who built a box out of red cedar. And he built it, he put it together, built it, but then took it apart and installed it actually on the roof. And so we had a box in a box, and then we had another box even in there. Because, you know, with watering and such, I mean, we watered twice a day. On a rooftop, it's 150 degrees. And so we didn't want that outer box to rot, no matter what wood it is. Eventually it would rot if we didn't have another box. So this was the day of planting up on the rooftop. And you can see we have our Bellevue students and a few UNL. There were some that are not in the picture, but we planted a star magnolia on the roof that just has been doing really great. And then on the one side, all herbs were planted. And so we had 16 different herbs and peppers, and they cannot tell you how they flourished. I mean, it was a surprise even to us. We thought, okay, have we ever really planted 10 herb beds and 16 different herbs? And this was an herb garden that we harvested and harvested and harvested for the restaurant to the table. So, I mean, this is what we picked, probably what we harvested every 4 or 5 days tops. I mean, those herbs loved the heat. They loved the sun. But again, we were there twice a day, at least, for sure once a day, either watering or figuring things out. And we even had Japanese beetle that needed to be taken care of on a couple of our roses. But the petunias and the geraniums did absolutely wonderful until probably mid-October. Vinca, verbena, Dusty Miller did great. Rose Marvel Salvia and Moss Rose. Lantana in just the right spot. So since there's a pergola up there, there's a couple areas that have a little bit of shade. And so we put the parsley there, and it did wonderfully. Butterflies in the sky. So we planted butterfly bushes and checked them out. I mean, we had beautiful butterflies on a rooftop that hung around. They hung around for months, not just a few days. And so wait until the spring. We're going to do some more fun things up there. And there's 2 of them. And you're welcome to go visit there anytime you want. And the pool area as well. So I'm going to stop for just a split second, and then, and if you'd like me to go on, we can go on to the trees in Bellevue, because we'll buckle back. This is kind of a sharp turn and buckle back to trees for Bellevue now. But also just please unmute your mic. And if you have questions so far, please let me know, or we'll move forward and then stop there, what do you think? Michelle, should we go on?
Yeah, let's see
Okay.
about the trees in Bellevue.
Okay. And so sharp turn back to trees. So you can see, at least, let me just say, you can see that we're involved in a lot of fun projects. And that's the good thing about, just making sure that we're able to address different things, making sure that we're not just about EAB, but that we are part of sustainable landscapes, or that we're working with developers. I mean, Jay Lund is a new developer in Omaha. He owns Green Slate with his partner, and he's brought us on board with what he's doing. We've brought him on board with what's sustainable and what's not, and what's good and what shouldn't be done. And so, when a developer works closely with us, those of us that are, environmentally conscious and conscientious, and it's a big deal. And so I think bringing the developers on board with us is really important. So trees in Bellevue, I went off of the list that that Joanne gave me, and some places that she said might need some trees. So the Reed Community Center, she told us, this winter has removed 8 ash trees and elm trees, and but haven't been there since their removal. So one thing I noticed about Bellevue, and I've always noticed, because I've had friends there, the students are there, churches, various places to go. Bellevue's very forested, right? And so I can see, maybe this isn't true and I don't know what I'm talking about, but I think I can really truly see how removing a few trees might not seem like, oh, okay, there's still, 25 on the property and we removed 8. It's okay. I noticed that there are a lot of evergreens, a lot of declining evergreens and old evergreens and pines, and that neighborhoods, there didn't seem to be any trees in the right of ways anywhere. And when I see that, I know a few things, because we've worked in Springfield, and the parks in Springfield, they don't have the capacity to have right-of-way trees to be pruned, to be maintained. And so a lot of times when a municipality stays away from right-of-way trees, it's because they don't have capacity, or because the trees go right into their front yards. And so why plant them along the sidewalk where they will maybe need more pruning and more maintenance, when we can plant into a person's yard? But I noticed there weren't, at least where I was in the older area, it just lots of declining trees. But because there are other trees, might be a harder sell. And tell me if I'm wrong later. But so the Reed Community Center looked pretty barren to me. If this was a project I would be working on in Omaha, I'd say, okay, there might be a reason why that center or that stretch of land has no trees. Either they were recently removed, or they play ball there and nobody wants trees planted there. I don't know, but I think that that there's so much that can be done. And I didn't notice where they had been removed, the trees. So either someone did a good job of removing those stumps and grinding them down, or I may have missed something. And so then I just went ahead and went to the Bellevue Cemetery, through the cemetery, because it obviously is historical as well. And old pines and evergreens, old bur oaks through that cemetery. But I looked a lot for new trees that had been planted, and there were not any that I saw. And I often do that when I go, just traveling and looking into different regions and areas, just to see if anything's being replaced, because you know that through the years, many things have been downed in storms or what have you. And so when I see nothing in their wake, it kind of scares me. Cassio Pool, let's see. When they redid the pool, they took out all the pine trees and they haven't been replaced. Now, I looked for stumps. I looked for stumps, but I could not find them. But I kind of figured they were in that top picture on the right, kind of in that area, must have been. And then there's that walking trail right behind. And I don't know if they came out of there, but that would be a great place for some shade trees for sure. And of course, around where the pool is, where the children are playing. But again, that's public that's public space. And I don't know if the Parks Department in Bellevue has the capacity to maintain. No trees around the play area. That always jumps out at me right away, because there are ornamentals that may not bring a lot of shade that you can still plant. There are, tall trees that you can keep elongating so that eventually, they're not blocking views and kicking too many leaves into the pool area. And besides, in summer, trees usually don't, when kids are playing in the pool, trees usually don't lose their leaves then. Wake Robin School. Again, I noticed in Bellevue, big boulevards. I mean, just really wide is what I mean. And now there you have utility wires, but still, there are areas, there were streets that did not have utilities. And I just thought, I wonder why this isn't a beautiful boulevard of trees. But they did have many trees up by the school, right up, butted up to the window of the school. Bertha Barker Elementary School. Those were ash trees, most of those along the in the left hand side, the left picture and the left hand side of the picture. Lots of, well, not a lot, but I think those were 2 or 3. They were fairly, and then the one on the left side picture, right side of that, the tree was an ash. So something should be in the understory, right? College Heights really stuck out at me. And Joanne says some along the walking trail definitely could use more, and had planted some before I was on the board, but because I don't think they were taken care of, they may have died. So this was just going into the neighborhood and I noticed it just was the most unique tree planting I've ever seen. So I don't know what's underneath that concrete. That is all concreted. It doesn't look like the trees were planted before the concrete was laid, but I found it really interesting that they were alive. And I think crab apples. So, but here you can easily see College Heights Park. Now if someone else looked at this picture, they might say, oh, but look at all those trees in the background. Yes, but they were far in the background and in other people's yards, which is fine because they still offer shade and the benefits, but nothing in that picnic area or around the area where the children would play. You can really see it here. Those are way in the background. They might look like they're not, but they're pretty far back, not enough to offer any shade anywhere near the play area or the eating area. And this is the walking trail. There's a lonesome bench that's right on the left side of that, and it continues. Again, it looks like there are trees. There's not. None along the walking trail or to offer shade in that area. They're way back. This is Northfield. Another thing I noticed, and again, public space. Big boulevards, big areas where you could easily go all the way around that fence, and we've done that here around all kinds of ballparks to offer shade for spectators, to just offer, aesthetics, offer all the benefits that you'll see the bleachers there. And that tree behind it, if I remember correctly, is an ash tree in that person's yard. So behind those bleachers, but those benches, but not anywhere near the bench. And you can place some trees there, even though there's a stop sign, you could place some trees there. Joanne mentioned the cabin, the log cabin, the historic log cabin. There's declining trees, and that's pretty obvious. And so couple new trees should be planted in that area too. Pretty declining. And then as we left, we noticed the old church, the First Presbyterian Church, that had some ash, I think one ash in the backyard or in the side, and then no trees on the other side. So, easily, so easy to be able to look at an area and say, oh, wow, that could take 10 trees, or this right of way could take 20 trees, what have you. And then of course, Don Preister mentioned Aspen Park lost a lot of trees last summer due to storms, and 20 trees are going to be planted April 30th in Willow Spring Park as well. And I didn't have a chance to check that area out. And so here's what we always say about what the community needs. Your community knows what it needs the most of, better than I ever would. But generally, communities need education of their residents, neighborhood associations or groups that take on special projects, business districts, schools that take on the projects because of their science programs. We always need funds to purchase trees, to down trees, the administrative support. And those funds generally for us, including our nonprofit, come from grant sources, the NET, the foundations, Arbor Day, those strong private public partnerships, neighborhood funds. We had a neighborhood, El Dorado, here in Omaha. They funded $18,000 of their own trees. They couldn't stand how just leached out and old their crabapple trees had become. And then they had ruined them themselves by pruning them improperly. And so then the trees really died and just looked awful. And so we worked with the city. They brought us on board, and we worked with the city to have them removed. And then they paid for their own trees. They had it, and they had saved for it for years through their memberships. And then they actually were able to plant their own new tree canopy and chose about 10 different species of trees. And then volunteers. We need volunteers to plant the trees and to help care for them. So tree maintenance is huge to reduce the mortality of trees, right? We go back and we don't often have time. Smaller nonprofits, we don't often have the staffing either or the time to say, how are those trees doing? I travel the areas, but I can't always take the time to say how many totally died in this area, how many are declining, how many are well taken care of. So, so that's always maintenance is big for us. And then partnerships and collaborations with nonprofits and city officials. That's really important. I don't know, you know, if you have a community where your parks director and your forestry person, you know, manager is not on board with wanting to work with your group, good luck, because you need their approval, right? For just, I mean, we don't plant anything unless we have John Wynn, that's our city manager, forestry. And now John and I, we've had such a long standing relationship where, you know, there's just the trust, and he knows we're planting the right tree in the right spot, and he approves it, and we're good to go. But before that, it's difficult. And so, okay. And so here's some key websites and organizations that we love. And I'm going to unshare or stop sharing, unshare, and come back to a conversation.
Dawn, I see that you have your hand raised. Do you have a question?
Michelle?
Michelle, I was trying to let
Excuse
you
me.
know that
Michelle,
chat.
I cannot, I'm sorry, don't mean to interrupt anyone. I cannot start my video. I'm trying to start the video, and it says you can't start the video because the host has stopped it.
Oh, hold on. Let me see what I can come up
That's
with.
probably why I wasn't on with the PowerPoint. I'm thinking, I don't know, but.
Whoops. Sharing my screen won't do us any good. I do not know. Screen sharing is still enabled, so I'm not quite sure
Oh, geez.
what to do.
Try it now.
Okay.
While she's doing that, we do have a couple of announcements. And I would also mention that the screen share, or I'm sorry, the
There we are.
mute has been muted by the host, so people hadn't been able to answer questions.
Oh,
And also the
No
chat.
wonder you were all so quiet.
And also the chat was
oh,
that's why we haven't heard from anybody.
oh, thank you.
The chat is still disabled.
Try it
All
now.
right, I will see what we can do.
Okay, chat and microphones are now independent and working. Thank you.
Okay. Well, goodness, just if you can unmute yourselves so that we can really just kind of talk about anything you'd like. That's what I'm here for.
Hey, Mark, you unmuted. Do you have a question?
No, well, I'm working with a couple different community organizations, and I did not have a question. I'm just putting some notes together. So, but this is very informative. Thank you for the meeting.
Oh, good. You're welcome.
Hello, my name is Travis London from Louisiana. I wanted to ask if y'all had worked with y'all county agent, and if so, how many years have y'all worked with y'all county agent, and how great the relationship are? How many years?
So what agent, who would we work with? I'm sorry.
I think he's saying the county extension agents.
Oh, the extension office. We have, so when we held our for us personally, when we held our garden walks, the master gardeners volunteered and earned hours at the at each garden. So, you know, different people chose different gardens, and then they sat in the garden and kind of explained things to people or just stamped their cards. So so yes, we have in the past, but not too much on specific projects. You know, the extension office has specific projects that they work on. And, you know, if we can partner, we're more than willing to anytime, but we're a little bit separate in that respect.
All right, we are just about out of time. So Diana, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your story, and also doing that assessment of Bellevue. That was really helpful. We very much appreciate that. So we do have a few announcements for Green Bellevue. I was hoping Steve would still be on. So Dawn, if you don't mind giving a quick Earth Day update, that would be great.
Thanks, Michelle. Yes, we are looking for some volunteers to go to pick up the proclamations this Tuesday and then the next Tuesdays. Carrie may want to say more about that, but we need some folks at Papillion's meeting and at La Vista's meeting this coming Tuesday. We have that coming up. We have a host of activities that Steve and the committee are putting together for platform. So we will be having a month-long set of activities, including what Deanna mentioned about the 20 trees that we will be planting in the park in Willow Springs. We'll have a couple of Arbor Day programs, and all of that information will be shared through email and on our Green Bellevue website. So please stay tuned to either the Earth Day Omaha or the Sarpy County Earth Day programs for all of those activities where you can do good for the environment and earn some prizes at the same time. And Carrie, did you want to comment?
Let me just give you guys a cell number to call if anybody is willing to volunteer for the activities. 402-415-4200. I can send you a copy if you didn't get it yet of the dates and places and volunteers that we already have.
Great. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Deanna. Nice program, and thanks for coming down and taking all those Bellevue pictures. Just an FYI, we still have not identified emerald ash borer in Bellevue.
I know. I wanted to ask you that because your Bellevue is part of the quarantine, the USDA quarantine, and I thought, well, certainly it must be because it's been identified. And then I thought maybe it, but you know, you have to know it's there, don't you?
Right. We believe it's here, but
Yeah.
we just have not seen any sign. We have not confirmed it.
Maybe you'll luck out. That would really be something. But, you know, I wanted to just say, if you folks need help with, or just, you know, want to work with a nonprofit that does this, that goes in and works with neighborhoods and the neighborhood associations and such, just keep us in mind, because we are in different municipalities now, smaller towns, larger I mean, you know, we're not just in Omaha. So, no.
Sure.
But thank you.
I don't know if any other board members who are still on have any announcements.
This is where I'd usually plug our next program. However, our next program is actually Earth Day Omaha. So join us in Elmwood Park. We are working with So Sarpy County Earth Day is working with Earth Day Omaha to do some joint in-person presentations, kicking off with Earth Day Omaha. So make sure you sign up for the Earth Day Passport once that goes live. I believe that is April 22nd. So we will be doing similar things to last year, where we will have activities that you can do on your own and also activities where you can join others outside. We will be ending our Earth Day month-long celebration with our picnic on May 22nd. So between April 22nd and May 22nd, keep an eye out. There's a lot of things going on in the Omaha area. So there is one more Green Bellevue board update, and that is that our Bee City USA committee is under the leadership of Dr. Tyler Moore, coming up with an integrated pest management plan. So we are in the draft stage of that, and we will be working with other partners to present that to the whole of the community for those who are interested in reducing pesticide use and promoting our pollinators. If you have any questions, you can feel free to reach out to any of our board members. My email address is michellef@greenbellevue.org. You can also find more information on our website. So with that, I hope everybody has a fantastic afternoon. Enjoy the incoming spring weather and get ready for Earth Day. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.